A Commitment 2001 special presentation. The Cincinnati Mayor's Race Debate. Presented by WLWT Eyewitness News 5 and the League of Women Voters. Here now, Dave Wagner.
Good evening and welcome to the Cincinnati Museum Center. Tonight is an historic evening. For the first time in 75 years, Cincinnati will elect a strong mayor. And for the last time, the two candidates will go head-to-head in a debate. WLWT Eyewitness News 5 is proud to join the League of Women Voters in sponsoring the debate this evening. The League is a nonpartisan political organization, and for more than 80 years, it has encouraged informed, active participation by citizens in our government. Through efforts from local chapters to its national office, the League of Women Voters is now recognized as one of our nation's premier grassroots citizens organization. And now to the participants this evening in this debate. First, the candidates. Charlie Luken is a Democrat and the incumbent mayor of Cincinnati. His opponent, charter candidate Courtis. The panelists tonight are local media representatives. John London represents Eyewitness News 5. Beside him, Maurice Vassar from WCIN Radio. Mr. Vassar is a co-host of 1480 Talk. Gregory Courtis joins us this evening from the Cincinnati Enquirer. And our final panelist this evening is Lucy May from the Business Courier. And one important piece of business before we begin here, we're talking the rules. Each candidate will have 3 minutes for opening statements. Questions from the panel will alternate between candidates. Each will have 2 minutes to respond to the questions. His opponent will have 1 minute for rebuttal. And one interesting twist this evening, each candidate will also have the opportunity to ask his opponent a direct question, and candidates will have 1 minute to answer that, and we'll end with 2 minutes for closing statements. And I might add, while both candidates are former Channel 5 anchors, none will use a teleprompter this evening. So, we're going to begin with opening statements this evening. The order was determined by coin toss before the debate. Mr. Fuller, you have the honor of beginning the evening. You have 3 minutes.
All right, thank you very much, Dave. Good evening, and first let me thank WLWT, WCIN, and the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this debate. You know, 1 week from tonight, Cincinnatians will ask themselves a very important question. Where do we go from here? You'll have to ask yourself, why have we reached a point in time when good citizens don't even feel safe walking down their own street? Are we satisfied with what we are creating for our children's future? Or will we choose a vision that will produce a city that children want to inherit? Will we accept business as usual, or will we move forward into the future? 1 week from today, your vote will tell the entire world who we are and who we want to be. This election is truly about the candidate who has leadership right now, the candidate who can heal this city and heal the racial divide in this city and bring us together. And I can assure you, leadership is not in a name. Leadership is something in your soul. Leadership is something that you must have with passion, with sacrifice, vision, and then action. My specific 7-point plan is a vision. It includes a city where the investment in our neighborhoods produces a livable place for every single citizen. A city where respect and accountability will breed safety and order on our streets. A downtown enhanced by the city's arts and heritage. And then a cultural commission that will reach out into communities and help our young people and our seniors. A city government that focuses on growth through efficiency, inclusion, and jobs. And finally, I see a city that just doesn't talk about race relations. This is a city that says in one single voice to the entire world that we will protect all the rights of all of our citizens, and we will never tolerate racism or discrimination inside the boundaries of this great city ever again. I put forth this vision because I want to be your next mayor. I have not resorted to divisive, negative campaigning. I think this city is better than that, and you deserve better than that. I entered this campaign the same way I hope to enter City Hall, with confidence, and it is a walk of faith, knowing that this battle is not mine alone. I need your support. I need your vote on November 6th. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fuller. Mr. Luken, you have 3 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you very much, David. Thanks to the League of Women Voters. Thanks to WCIN and Courtis. Thanks to you for being here. I know we've argued about how many of these debates we should have, but you're here tonight, and I thank you very much for that. Cincinnati, ladies and gentlemen, is poised for a rebirth. It is very much going to be a rebirth first and foremost at City Hall, without regard to whether Courtis or I get elected. We have a new system. We're going to have a new city manager, a mayor with new and enhanced powers, a new city council, new department heads, really all across City Hall. And you can look at that in a couple of different ways. You can look at that and you can say, this city's got a lot to do and it's really awful. Or you can look at it like I do. And you can say, the decks are clear. The agenda is clear. The focus is there. And now, with the new system, and I underscore the new system, the accountability and responsibility for producing results is there. This is a 4-year term for the mayor of Cincinnati. This is a 4-year term that will call upon the new mayor to set the standard. I suspect that if they elect mayors under this system 10 years from now, they will look at what the first mayor did. They will look at how the first mayor interpreted words like the power to review the budget, the power to begin the process of hiring and firing the city manager. All these words that are subject to interpretation, I believe that the first mayor will set the standard. So this is an election about our future. It is a cliche to say that this is an important election. It is also a gross understatement. There is no on-the-job training for being mayor of the city of Cincinnati. And as you hear Courtis and I review the issues tonight, and we have serious differences about what are the priorities for our government, I would ask you to keep in mind one other important point, and without regard to how you come down on it. You can have a laundry list of ideas. You can have all kinds of wonderful ideas. The question is, who has the ability, who has the experience, who has the judgment to lead this city for the next 4 years? I believe our future is much better than our recent past. I am optimistic about it, and I look forward to talking with you about it for the next hour.
Thank you, Mr. Luken. Now to the panelist questions. We're going to start with Eyewitness News 5's John London, who has the first question for Courtis Fuller.
Courtis, in my nearly 30 years in Cincinnati, I have yet to meet a candidate who didn't include neighborhood revitalization in his or her platform, in his or her campaign. And in nearly 30 years, some of our neighborhoods have steadily deteriorated. We're going to have a new system in a few weeks. As strong mayor, what will you do specifically to make a difference for the have-nots on Cincinnati's neighborhood map?
Well, it's a good question, John, and that is why neighborhood revitalization was the #1 focus in my platform. And what I did was look at what was working around this country. I immediately looked to Philadelphia and Mayor John Street, where he said, what we will do is go in and reclaim abandoned buildings and clean up vacant lots and take back our city. When you clean it up and restore it, you give dignity to people who live in every single neighborhood. And that is why that was the focus of my 7-point plan. It was one of the first planks that we brought out because we thought it was important to not only give hope to citizens, but also allow them to reinvest in their neighborhood. By doing this, we will encourage, through low-interest loans, to allow people to buy those buildings, to reinvest in those buildings for homes and also small businesses. It's working in Philadelphia, and I believe it can work here.
Mr. Luken, 1 minute.
Yeah, John, I think there is a difference here on one important point. And as I understand Courtis's 7-point plan, he suggests allowing neighborhoods to have the ability to raise their taxes to pay for neighborhood development. But there's a better way to do this. It's called House Bill 6. It is currently pending in the state Senate. It would give us the ability to use the same tools for neighborhood development, tax increment financing that we can use for downtown, and it will make a huge difference.
The next question comes from Maurice Vassar, WCIN Radio.
I was just getting started.
Continue on if you want. Good.
Well, I just wanted to mention one other important thing that's currently making, I have 30, David, thank you. I also want to make one other point. We've been working on the establishment of a housing court for Cincinnati. Cleveland has one. It is a place where the only issues that go before the court are issues of substandard housing, litter, and blight. And those points are very important for a court to focus on exclusively. If they're dealing with all the criminal problems and also housing tends to get pushed down, so a housing court would be helpful.
Finished? All right, thanks. Next question from Maurice Vassar, WCIN Radio. Your question for Mayor Luken.
Mr. Luken, you called for a Justice Department probe on the Cincinnati Police Department on April 12th after the riots. Had you already planned to call for a probe, or did you call for this probe because of the riots?
Well, Maurice, we were in constant communication with the Justice Department before the events of April. And in fact, I had several meetings with the United States Attorney about the very subject of whether the Department of Justice was interested in coming to Cincinnati. Rightly or wrongly, those discussions indicated that they were continually and quietly reviewing the situation in Cincinnati, but they didn't want to do a full practices and procedures investigation. Let me emphasize one thing. I didn't call the Justice Department to Cincinnati because I believe we have a bad police department, because I don't. I think we have a good police department. But I want to make the statement that we are open. If the Justice Department can help us get better, I think Cincinnati should embrace that opportunity. They have made recommendations, and many of those recommendations are of an ilk that are the same thing Cincinnati Can has been talking about, the same thing we've been talking about in the racial profiling lawsuit. The Justice Department did not come here to Cincinnati to criticize the police department. In other cities, they've gone in and they've sued the city. And as a result of those lawsuits, police departments end up under consent decrees. I don't want Cincinnati's police department under a consent decree. I want to work proactively with the Justice Department and anybody else that can help us improve our training, improve our recruitment, improve our in-service training. These are the areas that we must concentrate on to improve the Cincinnati Police Division.
Thank you, Mr. Fuller. 1 minute for rebuttal.
Sure, I will just respond by saying that even though other cities have had the Justice Department come in, the key is making sure that we take the action. What you hear from a lot of people, and I too think we have a police department that is effective, but must be willing to accept change when the citizens call for it, and if the Justice Department calls for changes. We have to be responsive to the cries of citizens, as well as organizations, whether they are internal organizations from within the city or organizations outside of the city that say change is necessary.
Our next panel member, Gregory Courtis from the Enquirer. Mr. Courtis, your question for Mr. Fuller.
Mr. Fuller, last Thursday you said, on this day or any day, I'm willing to take a character test with Charlie Luken. You can go back 15 years or 15 days, you said. What do you mean by that, and is character an issue in this campaign?
Well, the Cincinnati Enquirer made character an issue when it reported something that I thought was unfair and unnecessary. Let me say to you and anyone else who questions my relationship with my daughter, I find it insulting. I find the Enquirer insulting, and I will say the same thing that I said then, now. I wonder why, in the past 4 months, I've seen the Enquirer roll out background reports on Bill Broadberger. You rolled out a background report on Michael Riley that dated back 30 years, and you rolled out a report on Courtis Fuller. If, in fact, you find it necessary, then roll out a report on my opponent. And so I don't have any problems answering the question. I don't have any problem answering the question. But what I'm saying to you is I will answer any question that you put forth, but put it forth to every candidate and I'll be more than happy to respond to it. But I did respond then. So that is exactly what I meant. And I'll still say that. We have a few days left. Put together the character test, and I'll take it.
Want to remind the audience here, once again, we agreed at the beginning of the debate that there would be no applause, no cheering, no jeering, and if you could adhere to that, it would be fair to both candidates. We have a lot of questions to ask tonight. We want to make sure we get all of them in. We have a question for a follow-up rebuttal for Mr. Luken here.
Character is always an issue in a campaign, and I know of no flaw in my character or Mr. Fuller's that would disqualify either one of us from service as mayor of the city of Cincinnati. The only thing that I would, the only concern that I have is this implied suggestion now several times that we're going to blame other people for what has happened. I found out about it, Courtis, when Greg Courtis called me about it, and that's the first time I found out about it. I don't know of anything in your character that disqualifies you from serving as mayor. I will say this, like you, I just want to talk about the issues. I just want to talk about the future of our great city. And if we can come together and do that, I'll be perfectly happy with the results of this campaign.
Our final question from the first round is from Lucy May of the Business Courier. Your question goes to Mayor Luken.
Mayor, you say you support an expansion of the downtown Cincinnati Convention Center with more state and county money rather than new city taxes, but the state and county are facing the same tough financial times that the city is facing. How do you expect them to come up with any money for this, and does that mean the expansion is going to be delayed for the foreseeable future?
Lucy, I think that the expansion must be narrowed. The idea that the convention center can be expanded out over the interstate, I think is too costly. I don't think we can get it done. We are currently reviewing plans to do a different kind of expansion, one that will generate about $270 million in new activity, economic activity in Cincinnati, and create new jobs in Cincinnati. But the $400 million price tag, we're just not going to get there. We need to scale it down to the $150 million price tag, and we won't get the $350 million new activity every year, but we will get the 275, 280. Downtown Cincinnati, remember, is an important economic engine for our city. I have heard people engage in this. You're stealing money from the neighborhoods for downtown and all of this rhetoric back and forth. There's one important factor we all must remember. 60% of the income taxes that the city of Cincinnati collects, it gets from people who live outside the city and work inside the city. That's why we're able to have an award-winning park system. That's why we were able to put $2 million more to rehabilitate our inner city recreation centers this year. That's why we have the ability to talk about putting more police officers on the street. That's why when Chief Wright came before council today and said it is a new day in fire safety and we need more staffing, we need better training, we need to prepare for the new challenges of being a firefighter after September 11th, 2001, we have some funds available to do those kind of things. So the neighborhood downtown debate is not productive, and downtown needs to be healthy and vital to attract those dollars.
Thank you. Mr. Fuller, you have 1 minute for rebuttal.
Thanks a lot, Dave. When you look at other cities, Minneapolis, Pittsburgh, San Diego, they all wrestle with the same problem we're wrestling with here, and finding a way to expand or even build a new convention center. And so that is one thing that the mayor and I will not disagree on. I mean, we both understand it's a struggle. But, and I'm happy to hear him say that it may be important to even scale it back, because what I've been saying is that, and I've stated that at least within the first 18 months of this administration, we would come to some resolve and put forth a plan. And it may be to scale back, it may be to build at a different location. But the point is that I think what is troubling people is that we just have not made a decision. And if, in fact, the money isn't there, push it to the side, start focusing on second and third tier convention efforts, as some places have done around the country, that is a way that you can still bring in money to our area.
All right, now back to John London. John, your question goes to Mayor Luken.
Mayor, you mentioned Fire Chief Robert Wright talking about what the firefighters will need now that they are on the front line in the war against terrorism. 23% of the general operating budget already goes to the fire division. That's $71 million. What measures are you prepared to support, and how do you pay for them for the enhanced protective gear and the like?
John, since I've been at City Hall the last 2 years, we have made it the clarion call to do more with less. We have fewer operating dollars than we had because of the economic slowdown, and we are doing more. We are doing more in terms of training police officers. We are doing more training of firefighters. We are doing more in terms of repaving streets. What we have got to focus on is the ability of the city, through cutting back departments that have become too large over the years, to put money where our priorities are. Now, it's clear to me that at this time in our history, the number one priority that all of our citizens expect us to do is keep them safe. I visited with the postal workers the other day, and we were talking about their new challenges, because all of a sudden, not only are firefighters on the front lines, but postal workers are on the front lines. These are the people that are doing it every day, at risk every day. It's a new day for the city of Cincinnati in terms of our safety needs. And when I talk about having the experience to get the job done, I've dealt with tough budgets before. In the 80s, you'll remember, you're old enough to remember, we lost revenue sharing, and 8% of the city's operating budget was just pulled out from under us, but we dealt with it. We made the cuts and changes that were necessary, but we didn't do it at the expense of important services like safety. And you're absolutely right. If we're going to protect our citizens, it's not just the police department. Right now, after September 11th, 2000, it is the health department and it is the fire division, just to name a few.
Your rebuttal, Mr. Poehler.
Sure, I think that priority is important. I had lunch actually on Saturday with a firefighter, and that's the first thing he asked. He said, you know, would you cut the budget? Would you be a person who would cut our budget? He said, we need more. And I said, well, of course, looking at September 11th, that is a priority. And of course, that would not be something that we would do. We couldn't do it because of the need for our safety in this city. So, you know, it has to be a priority as we work through the budget, and that will be coming up soon, as you know. As we work through the budget, I think we all want to make sure that safety is the #1 priority.
Our next question comes from Maurice Vassar, WCIN Radio. Your question for Mr. Fuller.
Mr. Fuller, had you been mayor on April 9th, what would you have done in that fateful Law and Safety Committee meeting to avert what, in the minds of many, led to the riots?
Had I been mayor, it wouldn't have happened to begin with, because you do have to look at how we got to that point. And what we heard then, you hear even today. It's really a criticism of what people see as City Hall. A lot of that is not lashed out directly at Mayor Luken, but it is at City Hall. And yes, the mayor, the buck stops there. And so you immediately start to work with people. You make sure that the dialogue is ongoing so that things don't erupt on one fateful day. But let's say, had I been there, even though, as we all know, and it's been reported that that was a committee meeting, and the mayor he was not chairing that. But I think that, and I've said this to him before, that I think it would have been a critical signal to all of the city had he stayed in there, because, you know, people did not understand when he walked out. And so I think it just sent a bad signal to the entire city when he left. And I've stated that over and over again. We're beyond that. And so now we go forward. But what I would have done was make sure that we would have never gotten to that point by opening up the doors and doors of communications with people I agree with, and even those who I don't. And those are the type of things that will go into effect immediately after December 1st.
Maurice, it is easy to sit back and to look at what happened in April. I mean, it's a big target. And it's easy to say, if this would have happened, this wouldn't have happened. All I want people to understand is this. It was a trying time for the city. I made a conscious decision to become, for better or worse, the face of Cincinnati and to make decisions day after day after day. And ever since then, people have said, you should have done it this way or you should have done it that way. I gave it my best call. I stood for the city locally. I stood for the city nationally. And I said to the people of the country, Cincinnati has its problems. We are working on correcting them. And Maurice, we didn't start working on correcting them, despite some of what you hear, after the riots. If you go back to the State of the City speech I gave, we were fully engaged in having discussions about ways to engage this issue a few months after I was elected mayor. But all I would remind you or say to you is, I did the very best I could under some very difficult circumstances.
Our next panel member, Gregory Courtis from the Enquirer. Your question for Mr. Luken.
Mr. Luken, you've accused your opponent of dodging appearances and waging a peekaboo campaign. So my question to you is, where were you on September 24th when Mr. Fuller was at the Override Community Council? Where were you on October 6th when Mr. Fuller was at a candidate's breakfast at St. Mark's Catholic Church in Evanston? And where were you on October 23rd when Mr. Fuller was at the Black Student Association at Xavier University? Are you dodging appearances in the black community?
Well, you know also, Greg, that I've appeared at the Grassroots Leadership Academy, and Mr. Fuller did not, in the African American community. And you know that I've been at several appearances where he did not appear. Look, we have tens of appearances. My problem with Courtis, and I've said it before, is that in these face-to-face debates, which Oakley, Madisonville, Hyde Park, and a number of other, in Channel 9 and Channel 19 and many other television stations wanted to have, in WCET, he declined the opportunity to appear and debate face-to-face. And your own newspaper, in their endorsement of me on Sunday, put it this way. As a candidate without any government experience, Mr. Fuller needed to prove he was ready for the tough and demanding job, leading one of America's great cities. Instead, he has chosen to hide away from questions and debate. I know I'm not going to make every community council meeting, and for goodness sakes, I don't expect Mr. Fuller to make them either. I do think in what is an historic and important election in the city, it is important for the voters to see us go eyeball to eyeball, face to face, toe to toe, on more than just the two occasions that he selected. I've made that point again. I believe it strongly. And I believe on Tuesday, as a result of his failure to engage in these debates, the voters will not have had the number of opportunities to see us go face to face that they deserve.
Let's set the record straight. We've gone this road 6 times. We met together twice with the other 2 mayoral candidates before the primary. One time, right there, the day before the primary. Then, fast forward to the Monday after the primary. The mayor and I sat before the Chamber of Commerce, about 300 people, and we went face to face. Then, at the Jewish hospital, a couple weeks ago, the mayor and I, we were there again. And then, 2 weeks ago, at the Estes Conference Center. You heard it. Some of you might have been there. That's number 5. This is number 6. This is a new day. Now, because I don't run the same campaign as someone else, the goal is to be successful and get your message out. We won September 11th. I think we were successful. We're going to win November 6th. I think we've been successful.
Our next question from Lucy May of the Business Courier. Your question goes to Mr. Fuller.
Mr. Fuller, you were talking about your neighborhood initiatives before, and among the things that you've discussed would be allowing a portion of each city's neighborhood taxes to be returned to that neighborhood for improvement projects, and also the creation of special tax districts allowing the neighborhoods to reinvest in themselves. My question is, how would these initiatives work in the city's poorest communities, which have very little tax base to begin with?
Right. Well, a little bit is better than nothing. The point is that we want to make sure that people living in low-income neighborhoods have the same opportunity as those who are living in the high rent district. And that is not raising their taxes. It is not raising their taxes. It is not raising their taxes. What it is saying that we will take a portion of that and put it directly into a fund that can go into improvements in your neighborhood. It's the type of thing that turns communities around. There are many people in this audience who remember Mount Adams. Go back 30 years. And Mount Adams was a different Mount Adams than it is today. And I'm suggesting that same type of vision and hope for places like Over the Rhine. I haven't given up on Over the Rhine. I haven't given up on Price Hill, haven't given up on any section of this city. And so when I witness what they're doing in Price Hill, it's one of the first places I visited when I hit the campaign trail, was Price Hill and the Seminary Square project. See, they're doing it there. They're doing it in other cities, and we can do it here in Cincinnati in a great way.
Lucy, I think that the answer to your question is to try to take the poverty away from our impoverished neighborhoods and to make them special mixed income neighborhoods. Every study that has been done on urban America, every one, says that if you have only low-income people in a neighborhood, you do a disservice to the neighborhood, and particularly you would do a disservice to the low-income people in that neighborhood. And Over the Rhine in the early 70s, there were 22,000 people. They're now between 5 and 6. Over the Rhine presents, and go to the West End and look at it happening there, a mixed income neighborhood right near where I live. Over the Rhine presents, like many of our neighborhoods, the opportunity to get people to live in and around the urban core, to attract new residents to the center of our city with jobs and property taxes. That, to me, it seems, is the answer to the problem of low-income neighborhoods not being able to generate tax revenue.
Our next question from John London. John, your question goes to Mr. Fuller.
I believe my next question is to Mayor Luken, or am I wrong?
I believe the next question is to
Courtis?
To Mr. Fuller.
Courtis, both of you favor completion of the Banks project along the river. Given budget constraints and the likelihood that in this post-September 11th environment you can't count on very much money from the federal government in the years ahead, how does this project get completed? How is it going to be paid for? Or does it get indefinite back burner status?
Well, you would hope that it would not get indefinite back burner status. The great thing is that everyone who is committed to this project is pushing forward on it. And yes, we're going to have to get creative in light of conditions both here in the city, in the state, and then at the federal level. These are times unlike any we've seen before. And so that's where that whole notion of sacrifice comes in. Little did we know that September 11th was going to occur, and little did we know that we were going to face issues on the federal level and state level. But what I've seen as I've talked to people involved with this project, they remain committed to it. I just had a meeting last week, and we looked over the designs again and talked about the future. No one wants to let go of that because it's an important element of growing the city. It is Cincinnati's front door. And no, I'm committed to that project. And I will see and make a commitment to working as hard as I can to see that the funding is there for that project.
John, the promise of the riverfront is one we cannot renege on. We built those two magnificent stadiums, but you know, some people are never going to have enough money to buy a ticket to get into them. And so I've been meeting with the Hamilton County Park District and foundations to generate new funds to keep our commitment to the public area on the riverfront, the new park on the area. We cannot tell the rest of our community that the public portion of the riverfront is going to be reneged upon. Beyond that, we have gotten some very good proposals from places like St. Louis and around the country from reputable developers who say, we can make this work. You are absolutely right. The slowing of the economy has slowed sales tax revenues and slowed the project. But the vision is there, it's sound, it works, and it will happen.
Next question comes from Maurice Vassar, WCIN Radio. Your question for Mayor Luken.
Mayor Luken, there's a letter that you signed on October the 9th, 2001, that includes a plan to regionalize housing in Cincinnati in collaboration with Newport and Covington. The plan calls for laws and zones to be changed and property reallocated. Could you explain what this housing strategy partnership plan is all about, who the main players are, and how it will affect Cincinnati neighborhoods?
Maurice, I'll tell you what it's not about first. It's not about giving up any authority. It's not about giving up any jurisdiction. What it does is it recognizes one basic truism about our city, and that is we are part of a region. And whether you live in Fort Mitchell or Florence or Mason, the success of the urban core is vital to the success of us all. So with George Schaefer, who is the president of Fifth Third Bank, president and CEO of Fifth Third Bank, and with the Greater Cincinnati Foundation, and a number of community leaders, we have sat devising new strategies to ratchet up the new starts of housing in our region, in urban areas. And we have partnered with Newport and Covington, not because we're giving up anything, just because our problems are the same, our needs are the same. We're part of one region, and if you get the business community involved in the urban core, they care about the city of Cincinnati, but they also care about the future of Newport, and they care about the future of Covington, and that makes just perfect sense. The new mayor of Cincinnati, be it Mr. Fuller or myself, is mayor of 330,000 people in the city. And that's the political boundary of the job. But the new mayor must speak for the region. The new mayor must be an advocate in Columbus and in Washington and in the boardrooms across this community for our region. And my partnership for urban housing is part of that regional strategy. And I can report to you it's producing great results.
Mr. Fuller, 1 minute.
Well, I am glad to hear that we're not giving anything away. We've given enough away. And I can understand why we care about what's happening over in Newport and Covington, because they have all the projects we should have had. And so while there is a focus on regionalism, don't get me wrong, there is a focus on regionalism. I'm still concerned about the boundaries of this city, because we have problems inside this city that haven't gone away. And I don't want to take care of the rest of the neighborhood while our house is out of control. And so regionalism is fine. It is something that is projected, but I'm still concerned about what is happening at home, and that has to still be our #1 priority.
Our next panel member, Gregory Courtis from the Enquirer. Mr. Courtis, your question for Mr. Fuller.
Mr. Fuller, we've talked a lot about neighborhoods and housing this evening. Tomorrow, City Council is expected to give final passage to a sweeping change in city housing policy that would steer federal block grant money away from new affordable housing projects. Supporters say the plan would prevent neighborhoods like Westwood, Price Hill, and College Hill from being overrun with subsidized housing. Opponents say that it would force poor people to move to the suburbs. You have not yet articulated a clear position on this proposal. Do you support the housing impaction ordinance?
Well, here's my concern with it. First of all, I don't want to see anybody moving outside the city. I mean, if in fact I'm going to run for mayor, I want to bring people in to the city of Cincinnati. Sure, mixed income neighborhoods are an important element to growing the city. I grew up in a low-income neighborhood and survived. It was a good neighborhood. But in this day and age, it is important that if we are going to grow this city, whether it is the West End or Price Hill, I want to make sure that everyone has a neighborhood with dignity. And so my concern is that we're pushing people out of the city. I think what we could look at is making sure that development in predominantly low-income neighborhoods don't expand, if you will. that type of Section 8. But to say that we're going to push people out of the city, I think is the wrong thing to do.
With all due respect, I'm still not sure if he supports the ordinance. I just wanted to make it clear I do. There are 400 to 500 empty buildings in Over the Rhine today as we speak. And the city's priority should be in bringing new life and new jobs and new opportunities and new residents to the housing stock that we have. There are about 5,000 subsidized units in the county, and there are over 4,000 of them in the city of Cincinnati. So the city of Cincinnati has stood up to the plate, and the city of Cincinnati has said, we welcome those residents and we won't kick them out, but we will improve the mixed income character of these neighborhoods. I've already reported to you, Greg, what is happening in Over the Rhine. It's simply not healthy for anybody, and it's got to change.
Next question from Lucy May of the Business Courier. Your question tonight for Mayor Luken.
Mayor, you've said you'd like to take a lead role in recruiting developers, retailers, and new businesses for the city. But what development successes in recent years can you point to that show the city should be driving development? Would the city be better off with some sort of independent commission taking on this role?
Lucy, I think that the city of Cincinnati has had success when the mayor is the point person. Give you an example. When I was down in the East End and participated in a ribbon cutting of 60 new condominiums on the riverfront, the developer announced, and it did my heart some good. He said, I'm here today because the mayor has said we want new residents and we want new development in the city, and he supports it and he will stand behind it. Clearly, the city of Cincinnati has not been as successful as we would like in all our development projects, and the one that I got council to vote on 9-0 and then went away, probably good for the city, was the Nordstrom deal. But we are working on 4th Street at the renovation of the McAlpin's building. We have that in the hands of a qualified Cincinnati developer. We are seeing every day new developments and new opportunities for development. And let me mention what role I think the new system plays in this. Because I've had developers come to me from, say, if they come out of Pittsburgh, and they say, you know, I go in there, and the mayor sits there, and the mayor says, you're going to do this, and you're going to do this, and you're going to do that, and the developer's going to do this, and we walk out of here, and we have a deal. He says, I come to Cincinnati, and I work with you, and then I go over to the city manager, and then I get caught up in the red tape, and I get so confused, I don't know what to do. So I spend most of my time actually being the city manager and the development director of the city. The new system offers the mayor and the city manager the opportunity to put some accountability. The firewall between the mayor and the manager is gone under the new system. And the reason I'm so excited about it is, in fact, the new and enhanced powers of the new mayor.
Mr. Fuller, 1 minute for rebuttal.
Sure. I always hear that accountability is not there now. And I question that. The accountability should be there today to drive this city. This city has been sitting in neutral. And we hear because no one is accountable. It is the system's fault. Well, we've been paying people to run this city. This is a full-time operation. It's a full-time responsibility. But the only answer we get is that, well, as soon as the system changes, things will be okay. I agree, things will be okay. Not when the system changes, but when the people in the system change.
We have time for a couple of additional questions here, and I would like to go to John London if we can. A question for Mayor Luken.
Mayor, you created Cincinnati Can with the promise that its report would be swift and that it wouldn't gather dust like the ones that came before it. As you stand here tonight, are you satisfied with Cincinnati Can's contributions, and what are they?
I am not satisfied, John, but I think Cincinnati Can has made great progress, and let me give you just a couple of examples. When we got into an analysis of our criminal justice system, it became clear that there were disparities between juveniles who get arrested in the city and those that get arrested in the county. For example, If you get arrested in the city, a juvenile on a first-time nonviolent offense, in the county, if they have $200, they're put in a diversion program. In the city, that same juvenile will end up with a record. I can think of nothing more unfair than for a young person to end up with a record because he or she didn't have $200, and we've changed that. In the county, if you had a bad check, you wrote a bad check to Lazarus or some other place, and you made it good before you got to court, the case was dismissed. In the city, those same defendants oftentimes ended up with a criminal record. We have changed that. And while we have not refined the procedure for our new police community relations program, in collaboration with the Justice Department that's reviewing it and just issued their report, in collaboration with the collaborative lawsuit of the racial profiling situation, I believe that Cincinnati Can is a powerful and important resource to guide the changes that the city needs to make.
Mr. Fuller, 1 minute.
Sure. I want to see Cincinnati Can turn into, as City Beat newspaper said, Cincinnati Will. I think that is when we will start to really feel the impact of this group. Up until now, we have not, and I think collectively the city has said that. And so as we ponder on the future of Cincinnati Can, turning it into Cincinnati Will is so important. We have a lot of good people on that panel, on that commission. But you ask many of them, and they say, I don't know what we're doing. And so I'm just saying, at some point, the mayor initiated, the mayor has to be a part of it, has to get involved and guide that ship, or it's going to crash, and the serious problems of race relations will smack us right in the face again, and we don't want that.
And that concludes the questions from our panelists this evening. We move now to the candidate-to-candidate direct question. And Mr. Luken, you begin tonight. Your question, please, for your opponent.
Courtis, after the Roach verdict, I was sitting in my office till late at night trying to work with police and safety officials. And you were in a march late at night, and I know I've questioned your judgment in doing that, and I still do, but more importantly, you said that my call of curfew was unnecessary. While fires were burning in Avondale and places where you didn't even know what was going on. Do you still believe the curfew was a bad call, and why?
What I said then and what I'll say again is that I was there. I never felt threatened, but I said at that point, and I'll reiterate it, if in fact the chief of police of this city, if in fact the safety director called you and said, we need a curfew, then I support that, supported it then, support it now. However, I think a lot of people question, and I did too, that this curfew went into effect when everybody was home. And then the next day, the curfew was supposed to start at 10, but got pushed back because there was a play in town. And then on Friday, the curfew went away because the Reds came to town. So I'm not questioning the validity of the call. I'm just questioning the dynamics of the call and the timing of it. And so if it wasn't politics, it wasn't politics. If it was, I've said it then and I'll say it now, the truth of that will show its head November 6th.
Mr. Fuller, a question now for your opponent.
Sure. My question focuses on race relations because I talk to a lot of people, and honestly, they feel as though there is a disconnect with you and members of particularly the African American community. And so look into not my eyes, but the eyes of a little child, black and white, and assure them and all of us that if you are elected mayor one more time, that this city will change and move forward.
When I addressed the Rotary Club of the city, and long before that, I identified race relations as a #1 issue in this city. I led, along with John Cranley, who's here, and other members of council, the fight to loose a racial profiling lawsuit from the law committee and finally get it passed, the most comprehensive such law in the state of Ohio. I called in the Justice Department to make sure that our police department operated fairly for all our citizens. I put together a commission to deal with the subject of race relations. Not only Cincinnati can, but we had one in the works long before. It seems as if so many people, Courtis, and sometimes I think you, started paying attention, and it's unfortunate, started paying attention when the events of April happened. Let us take that negative situation and let us all recommit ourselves to use it, turn into a positive, and make this city better.
Now to closing statements, and Mr. Luken, you have 2 minutes for your closing statement.
Thank you very much, David. I'm just sitting here thinking about what I wanted to say in the closing, and I thought I'd tell you a little about myself that maybe you don't know. When I was 12, I caddied at Cincinnati Country Club, and I'd take the $2 or so I made, and I'd go over to Evan Field, hitch a ride or bum a ride, and play golf. And I went to Purcell, worked in a graveyard, worked in a warehouse, worked in a concrete plant. I won a scholarship to Notre Dame. It wasn't enough to pay the full freight. My parents sacrificed to send me there, not because we were poor, but because there were 8 of us. I came back and went to UC Law School, and always been proud to be a Cavalier, Fighting Irishman, and a Bearcat. I tell you that because I think some of the ways we approach people and some of our understanding of life comes from experiences early in our own lives. And I think many of those experiences of hard work and working to get an education and move forward shaped my life. I also tell you it because Cincinnati is my home. It has always been my home. My 2 children two of my children are here, the 2 that graduated from college, and one's up at the University of Dayton, running around town, I'm sure, trying to find a television that can get this on the TV. And the point of that is this. This is my home. This is the place I care about. This is the place that I want to see better. I am optimistic. I'm optimistic about the future of our town. I am positive about where we can go, and I know the naysayers are all over the place. But I pledge to you, if elected, our future will be better than our recent past. We will do better, and we will move forward.
Thank you, Mayor. And want to remind everyone we'd like to hold off the applause until the end. Mr. Fuller, you have 2 minutes for your closing statement.
Sure. Thank you very much, Dave. I want to, again, thank WLWT, WCIN, the League of Women Voters, and Mayor Luken for being a part of this debate. And you have to thank the great citizens of this great city. I also want to thank the person who doesn't get the credit, but, you know, when I stepped into this, I needed her support, and she's given me that, and that is my wife, Marla. I also want to thank my mother, who is here. Imagine that, running for mayor, Mom. She really taught me what a walk of faith is all about. Next week, you really have to ask yourself a couple of questions. Which candidate sets the tone for this city for tomorrow? Which candidate will help heal the racial divide? Which candidate will treat every citizen with respect and dignity? And finally, you have to ask yourself who was chosen and who was called. This city cannot afford to take the tranquilizing drug of do-nothingism anymore. We have to turn this city around. Together, we can make Cincinnati better. Together, we can say that history, despite its wrenching pain, need not be lived again. And together, we can say that the Freedom Center will represent the front door of this great city. Together, we can look on Fountain Square and use that as the rallying center that it has been for this entire city for many years. The rallying point of oneness. Together, we answer the cries of every citizen in every room in this city. We're a family, folks. Whether you're black or white, young or old, we are a family. And you turn this around by helping each other, being each other's brothers and sisters keepers. That is how we turn this city around. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
And that does conclude this evening's debate. We'd like to thank the candidates, the panelists, and our partner, the League of Women Voters, WCIN Radio, as well as the Cincinnati Museum Center. One final note to you, the voter here. Whomever you support, we urge you to go to the polls next Tuesday. This is a critical election for the city of Cincinnati, and your vote does indeed count. Thank you and good night. And now you may applaud both candidates.